Shroud is a man who talks a lot. He actually basically talks for a living, and I'm not saying that he's all talk. No, that's absolutely not what I'm saying. Shroud is incredible at FPS, and over the years he has given players a bunch of tips on how they can improve their aim and mechanics in game. What I wanted to do today is break down some of the best tips for FPS and how you can use them to help yourself improve at Valorant. Now keep in mind, some of these tips aren't actually going to be directly related to Valorant, but that's a cool thing about competitive games. Even if it's a tip for one specific game, oftentimes you can draw connections between other games. For example, when I show you this clip briefly from Shroud talking about improving at PUBG, I want you to try and draw some comparisons you might see between what he's trying to say and Valorant.
There's no like way to practice aiming in this game, right? So the best way to learn is just fucking fight. Don't be afraid to fight. If you're a new player and the first thing you're doing as a new player is hiding in a building forever and ever and ever trying to win your first game, you're not going to learn. That's not how you learn.
So if you didn't pick it up, in this clip, Shroud is talking about how in battle royales, there's not really any way to improve your gunfighting skills without actually taking gunfights. And this seems obvious, like you can do aim trainers of course, but at the end of the day, there's not going to be a one-for-one comparison to the actual game. And the best way to simulate encounters in a game is to have actual encounters. Now Valorant is not a battle royale, however it's also not Call of Duty. Sometimes you'll go literal rounds without seeing a single person, and this is amplified by the players who are actually afraid to take gunfights. They hide in corners, they bait their teammates, they're afraid to make plays. And if you want to improve at Valorant, you need to force yourself to take gunfights. One of the reasons some of these players are so incredible, Shroud, Tens, Scream, is because they're not afraid to take gunfights and they do not shy away. And they're not afraid to lose a gunfight, and at the end of the day, an individual gunfight or game doesn't really mean anything to them. If you're afraid to lose rounds, you're going to lose more rounds. Whereas if you treat every round as if it's a learning experience, you'll be able to create more learning experiences and thus become a better player more quickly. Speaking of which, if you're looking to become a better player more quickly, be sure to check out our Radiant level Smurf commentaries where the best players in the game walk you through how to carry in your rank. We offer a 5-division rank improvement guarantee, which we think is pretty crazy. It's like your local gym guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered you that, right? Not us. That's how confident that we are that our service works. Let's move on to the next clip, but if you wanted the fastest way to improve, be sure to check out SkillCapcom, link in the description below. The next clip I believe is probably the most important thing for new players to grasp, and it actually conflicts with what a lot of players believe about Valorant, so let's talk about it a bit. Notice how in this clip, Shroud is referring to spraying in Valorant as it being a crutch.
It's a lot of spraying and a lot of recoil control with the spray. Don't get me wrong, I love recoil control, but I don't like that. That serves as a crutch. That is essentially your crutch, and I don't like that. I don't like spraying being the crutch.
Something a lot of players complain about in Valorant is the random spray patterns and how they're harder to control than Valorant's counterpart, CS. In CSGO, there are set spray patterns, and this makes it so spray patterns are a lot more predictable to control, whereas in Valorant, your spray can be a little bit more wild when you start spamming a lot of bullets. The complaint here is that it actually lowers the skill ceiling since there's no mastering something that is random. This is intended, and the way Shroud talks about it here is that they are intended to be punished for spraying. The word he uses here that actually really resonates is panicking. For many players, when they commit to a spray, they've sort of thrown aim out the window and they are just trying to desperately grab the kill by spamming more bullets. But because of how you are punished for spraying in this game, it actually rewards tap and burst firing a lot more. And there are definitely times when spraying is appropriate, but I've heard Shroud talk about this sort of thing a lot on stream, and this is why you'll see some of the best players in the game are very tap-heavy players. As he said it, spraying is a crutch, and this is why when you watch players like Tens, Scream, Hiko, and Shroud himself, you'll notice they utilize a lot of tap and burst firing rather than spraying. And if you're a player who finds themselves spraying a lot, I hope a player like Shroud referring to it as a crutch makes you think about it just a little bit more. Moving on to tip number 3 though, and this is something that is overlooked way too often in competitive matches, and that has to do with worrying about your KDA far too much.
How do you feel when you're a bottom fragger? Fine. It doesn't matter what your score is. What matters what happens for you to get that score. That's it. That's what you got to remember. You got to remember, and you got to break things down to like, why is your score the way it is? Did you do something wrong? Did you whiff? Did you, like, if you feel like you're doing your part and you watch it back and you could tell like you did good, it doesn't matter if you went fucking 6 and 20. You know what I mean? You can do good without having a good score. That's just how these games work. It's a team game. You know what I mean?
Listen guys, the bottom line in a tactical shooter like Valorant is that there's a lot more to the game than just getting kills. Players like to throw around this sort of thing in comp all the time, and making fun of players who are bottom fragging, calling out somebody's KDA, saying they're not going positive, but at the end of the day, none of this is actually a great signifier of a player's impact on the game. For example, if you're playing a lurk role and are pulling multiple rotates the entire offense, that sort of stuff is incredibly valuable, but it's not something that's going to show up in your stats. Similarly, using well-timed utility to assist your teammates or baiting for your teammates so that they can get kills doesn't really show up in your statistics much either. Like sure, sometimes you'll get an assist from it, but when players are looking to see that you're bottom of the scoreboard, they're not really going to take into account the fact that you have 15 assists. They're probably just going to see that you have 4 kills and be like, alright, this guy's garbage. The example Shroud uses after this clip is if you're playing a duelist and you're doing an excellent job of grabbing your team's space, but you're also not landing any kills. Maybe you're getting traded out by your teammate, but you yourself are not killing anybody. You're still doing a really awesome job because you're grabbing your team the space that they need. There are so many different roles in Valorant, and depending on what role you're playing, you may be more set up to grab kills than other times. And I don't even specifically mean agent roles here, I mean player roles. All agents can play all roles, it just depends on timing and positioning. Now this doesn't mean you should always be entering as Sova, but if you're in a better position to entry than your Phoenix, sometimes you're going to have to. And sometimes, weirdly enough, you're going to be playing Phoenix and you're going to be in a position to play a lurk role. This isn't a glamorous role, it's a role intended to help your team perform better, but it's something you might have to fill sometimes, and because of that, your KDA might take a hit, but if you did your job well, does that mean that you played poorly because you're the bottom fragger? No, not at all. It just all depends on your impact in the game, and many players hit Immortal based off of their communication alone. There are literally so many ways to have an impact in the game that don't involve getting kills. But let's move on to a clip that really highlights that sort of thing just a little bit more.
Shroud, is there anyone's aim who really stands out to you? I mean, just about everybody's. Be honest. A lot of people's aim is fucking nuts, you know?
This is a bit of a smaller clip. He does go on after to talk about what he believes he should be known for in FPS, and it's actually his ability to adapt to new games, but specifically let's back up and talk about exactly what he's saying here. When he was asked whose aim really stands out, his response was just about everybody's, and there's actually a reason for that. Generally speaking, it may not feel like this, but aim is one of the easier things to improve in FPS games. I know your aim might struggle at times and it might not feel like that, but over time, your aim will literally just get better from playing the game more. It's all muscle memory. That's all it is. Obviously, there's some game sense that plays into this as well, but if we're talking raw aim, it basically just is a muscle that you need to train and it takes time. So what are you going to learn from Shroud saying everybody has good aim? Oh, and just a clarification, Shroud obviously isn't saying everyone has good aim. There are plenty of players who maybe struggle, but once you start to hit the higher ranks, pretty much every single player you come across can click ahead. You don't really want to give any of these players the opportunity to kill you, because if you do, they will kill you. So again, what's the takeaway here? Other things are just more important to focus on than aim. The players that are playing this game professionally are not always the #1 aimers in the world. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, but the players who are best at this game are the players who are the smartest players. They understand the macro play, they understand how rotations work and how to pull players from one side of the map to the other, how to manipulate what players may know about a round, and how players are going to peek different corners. Specifically, what I'm trying to get at here is that you can spend all of the time in the world trying to improve your aim, but at the end of the day, everyone at the higher ranks has good aim. The best way to climb in these games is to play the game and let your aim improve over time, but to spend time reflecting on your matches and making sure you're consistently making the right decisions so that you can put yourself in the correct situations where you can land those shots. Speaking of which, one of the best ways to improve your decision making is by doing VOD review, and if you're looking to get your VOD reviewed by us for free, feel free to check out our VOD review channel in the Discord, link in the description below. Moving on to our last tip from Shroud though, and speaking of which, this is actually from him VOD reviewing Dr. Disrespect. This one has to do with crosshair placement.
It's better to try to keep your crosshair placement as center as you possibly can, even when it doesn't matter, because it's good practice, right? So even me, when I was playing Valorant, I caught myself looking at the floor and I had to recorrect my brain. I was like, dude, you're not looking for loot. You're trying to frag, you know?
I think something a lot of players tend to forget when playing the game is that crosshair placement and correcting your crosshair placement is an active process that you should be doing in the game all of the time. It isn't just something that you learn and then it's always good. I mean, for the most part, you can improve your crosshair placement on average, but you should be constantly repositioning your crosshair based on where you believe the enemy is or where they're going to peek. For example, if there are 2 places the enemy can peek you from, you have to actively make the decision of which of these 2 locations is most likely the player will come from. Normally in that situation, you're going to choose the spot that you think they are most likely to peek you from, but to do that, you need to first determine which spot is most likely and adjust based on that. Similarly, if you think the enemy is going to full swing you, you need to adjust it for that. What if an enemy is going to jump peek you? You need to adjust for that. Have I been hitting a lot of body shots in this game? Alright, it's time for me to start focusing on aiming a little bit higher. Like actually physically adjusting my crosshair placement so that I'm aiming higher. This stuff is difficult to do and takes active attention, and if you're one of the people who is in silver and comments on these videos, I have good crosshair placement, I really encourage you to, like I said, do some VOD review and actually take time to look. Even in Immortal lobbies, I'm constantly seeing players who are aiming too low or have their crosshair floating in walls. It happens to everybody, and like Shroud is saying, it takes a lot of active attention to fix this issue, even for him. But anyway, if you have a minute, I just wanted to finish off this video by talking a little bit more about SkillCapped. Our rank improvement guarantee is honestly something you should take advantage of. I wish services like this were available when I was a kid trying to improve at games, but unfortunately I had to learn how to play the games all by myself. But now there are services like this that will literally guarantee to bring you up in rank so that you can learn to climb the ranks from some of the best players in the game. If you're looking for the best way to improve at Valorant, full stop, be sure to check out SkillCapcom, link in the description below. Anyway, thank you all for choosing SkillCapped, and we'll catch you in the next one.